Venom is the anti-hero of Spider-Man, and now he's got his own solo film. And I can't help but feel that he needs Spider-Man here. It feels Venom feels lonely here without Spider-Man. It feels like there needs to be a hero here to provide some wisecracks, to battle Venom, to sling something back with him, because this film, it just kind of feels like the black sheep of the Marvel films. I mean, you can tell because it feels like it's distant from the rest of the MCU. That it feels like in a different universe, completely different from Spider-Man, which it might be because we got that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse coming up. But apparently, I've been getting a lot of people talking to me saying like, oh man, is the Venom movie gonna be good? Is it gonna be good? They say like, I saw that trailer, and I saw how great Venom looked in that minute of footage. He looks so good. Looks so great. I bet you this movie's going to be great. And it's like, yeah, you know what? That 1 minute bit of that minute of footage of him, as Venom with like the teeth and the eyes and the tongue and the growling voice and stuff like that. Yeah, that looks great. It's just the other 111 minutes that I'm worried about here, and it's worth worrying about. Okay, so the story of Venom is essentially it kind of proceeds down this paint by numbers track. There's an alien symbiote that's come from the stars and it's crash land on Earth and it possesses a human being, and now there's one symbiote on the loose and there's these other symbiotes going to this mad scientist, and it proceeds so passively through this that you don't really feel any like the horror effect going on here. Like when we first see a symbiote possess somebody. It just kind of like happens. It's not even like terrifying with like the right lighting or direction, stuff like that. It's just like, oh, he's in a body now. Oh, he took another body. Oh, okay. Well, all right. I guess story's up and running now. And the main character who eventually gets possessed by the symbiote is Eddie Brock, played by Tom Hardy. And I got to give it up for Tom Hardy. He's trying to play this up as a comedy. I get the feeling like he went into this with kind of like a kamikaze attitude, realizing that, this script is so boring. It proceeds down the same track, this predictable track where, Eddie Brock is this media reporter, who wants to tell the truth and wants to bust the lid off the Life Foundation, which is experimenting with like symbiotes and taking in poor people to use for experiments. He wants to bust this Carlton Drake, the head of the company, played by Riz Ahmed, which he feels like such a wasted character here. Like, he seems like he should be that kind of like mad scientist who's like conniving and sinister, and he has evil plans, but he just seems so kind of like I said, kind of like passive and docile here. Also, just as kind of sleepwalking through the film a little bit is Michelle Williams, who doesn't have much to do as Eddie Brock's love interest. Who she's a lawyer, and of course, Eddie Brock's like, oh, maybe I can file through, maybe I can fiddle through her files and find something on this guy. And of course he does, but he makes the stupidest decision with how to use that information by ambushing him in an interview. And then, of course, after that, he loses his job, his girlfriend loses his job, and then their relationship is over, and before you know it, Eddie Brock is a drunk who's staggering into bars, and I couldn't believe this. I couldn't believe that they actually, because, like, the dialogue was very, straightforward, not much personality, not much chemistry throughout. They actually have a scene where Eddie Brock is in a bar, drinking, and just looking up at, like, the Life Foundation, like, oh, could have got them, and someone looks at him and says, hey, aren't you Eddie Brock? And he says, I used to be. It's like, are you serious? Like, this is the one thing, because I hadn't seen that second trailer, but I did watch the first trailer of it, and my initial thought was, I hope this stuff is cut, because it just seems way too expositional, way too flat dialogue. I hoped it wasn't in the film, and it is. All that really terrible dialogue from the trailer is in the movie. So eventually, he uncovers a secret plot going on with the symbiotes, and he infiltrates, and then all of a sudden he's possessed by the symbiote. Now he's Venom, and now he's got Venom inside his head, talking to him, telling him to feed him stuff so that he can eventually take over the world, or maybe not take over the world, or maybe kill another symbiote. He isn't quite sure yet. All he knows is that the symbiote is hungry right now, and thank goodness. But by the time that Eddie Brock gets possessed by Venom, the film kind of turns around. And I don't mean that it saves the film, or I don't mean it gets itself up and running. I mean, it saves it. Because at that point, Hardy realizes that he has to basically play an insane person who's hearing voices in his head and who's freaking out and who's constantly eating to satisfy this guy. And he goes for it. He goes nuts in this film. He goes insane. He starts shoving tater tots into his face. He starts eating chicken out of garbage bags. He starts running into to restaurants and eating stuff off plates and taking off his clothing. And he takes a bath in a lobster tank and starts eating lobsters whole. It's insane. And he starts babbling too. Like at some points he starts sounding like Jerry Lewis. Or maybe that was the intent. Maybe he was going for something else. But he's slurring his words and he's constantly drunk. And it's embarrassing, but at the same time, you're also kind of grateful for, him going over the top and embarrassing himself in this kind of role, because everyone else just feels so docile here. Like I said, Riz Ahmed, he never really becomes that sinister person that by the time he actually gets possessed by the more evil symbiote and becomes Riot, it just kind of feels like it was on schedule. It doesn't really feel like it was like an organic shift into him being this evil guy. It just seems... he doesn't really have much of a drive. It just sounds like, he's got like a simple god complex, and he's too just simple, kind of crazy. Michelle Williams, like I said, she has not much of anything to do here. An interesting use though of Jenny Slate, who you might remember as the villain from Zootopia, and she was a voice in The Secret Life of Pets. She's got a great voice, and she could have been fun as one of the lead scientists of Drake's Foundation, but like I said, she's wasted too. And there's so much that feels wasted here that you could do more with here. And I think that mostly has to do with the fact that this film is tone deaf. It really is. This film can't figure out whether or not it wants to be a creature feature, whether or not it wants to be a horror film, whether or not it wants to be a superhero film, whether or not it wants to be a comedy. Because honestly, it seems like most of the time it's trying to go for comedy. Like, it's not just doing a few quips here and there. It's doing... the buddy comedy between Hardy and Venom is actually pretty fun, if that was the whole film. Like, honestly, the way that second trailer happened that I just watched there, the second trailer with how, it ends with him saying, like, we can do whatever we want, and he goes around threatening criminals. That's at the very end of the film. Which is so sad. You feel like that should be the beginning of the film, so you can have more like this buddy angle here. But the problem is, like, it's tone deaf. Like I said, this film doesn't know where it wants to go here. Like I said, it breezes between so many bits of, like, the humorous parts of Tom Hardy exploding. It gets way too dark at certain points where you start seeing these homeless people and scientists that have kids are brutally murdered by Drake, and it's just and you don't really... they don't really bring it around again. Like, you think, like, oh, well, Eddie Brock knew this one scientist, and she dies, and she had kids and everything. Well, maybe, is he going to avenge her? Nah, just toss her to the side. Just toss her aside. We got too many plot arcs going, because he's also trying to uncover the Life Foundation. He's trying to, stop this other symbiote. He's trying to get his job back. He's trying to mend things with his girlfriend. And all of this stuff is just, it's like plug and play elements. They don't really connect at any point. It's a mess, and it's a frustrating mess, because I think when it does embrace the buddy angle of Eddie Brock and Venom, the film kind of works. It's a little bit embarrassing, but at the same time, everyone else just feels so bored in the script that Tom Hardy's like, well, I might as well have fun. I might as well camp it up here. And it's like, well, yeah, sure, why not? Might as well. He is at least the most memorable thing here, because honestly, if Hardy played it straight here, if he just kind of, like, mumbled his way through his lines, just became just another bearded tough guy, and, he would have just faded into the background, and this film would have been completely forgettable. But I'm certainly not going to forget it now, thanks to Tom Hardy's performance, because at the very least, if you don't like... because I didn't like the film, but if you didn't like the film, you can at least say that Tom Hardy tried. He tried. He put all his heart and soul into scenes where he had to, shove tater tots into his face and then puke in a toilet and then make a scene in a restaurant and then eat lobsters alive. He put his heart and soul into that. The problem is that the film doesn't make room for him, and it just crowds it with all this other stuff that you just don't care about. Now, the action scenes, I know a lot of people are going to be asking, oh, well, come on. You got Venom. You got him in some awesome action scenes here. You got him with the tongue. You got him throwing around soldiers and stuff like that. Some of that stuff is cool. You don't get too much of it, but a few of those action scenes are neat. Yeah, there is a... But there's all these little confounding moments that are peppered into these action scenes. Like, for instance, probably one of the best set pieces here is there's a motorcycle chase where Eddie Brock is on a motorcycle trying to flee from these hitmen. Who must be like expert drivers, because they're like driving through signs and they're coming out of the woodworks and alleys and they're just smashing into them and trying to push them together here. And that's a neat scene, but then you've also got to suspend a little bit of disbelief, because in the same scene, the Life Foundation is sending out these suicidal drones that come out of the air randomly, just smash into cars and just blow up. And it's like, okay, it looks neat, but I'm like, how is the Life Foundation getting away with this in this town? And everyone just seems a little bit oblivious to this. It's like where does this relate to the grand scheme of things? It feels like such a mess at times. And then of course everyone is referencing that scene where he starts fighting all those SWAT people. Kind of fun, but most of that scene is in smoke. And including like the scene where Venom later fights Riot. A lot of the scenes with the symbiote are just, they're blurry. They're chaotic. They're ridiculously cut up, and the camera's bouncing all over the place. And there's so much blurring around that you can barely follow most of the action going on here. And the few bits of action that you can follow are just kind of like, they're not really doing much for me here. I mean, they're competently made. They look nice. I mean, I do like some of the car stunts here. They're pretty nice, but like I said, this film just can't find its footing, and it's missing Spider-Man. It needs, because Eddie Brock is making a scene of himself. He's ridiculous. He's goofy. He's over the top, and it's like I kept waiting for Spider-Man to come in here, someone to make a wisecrack, someone to combat him, someone that he can trade wits with, because he's kind of funny sometimes here. But if he had Spider-Man to play off of, it would have been so much fun. You would have had like a great, a fun picture here. You could have had a lot of fun with Venom and Spider-Man, but no, we just got to have Venom, and Venom just kind of feels like lonely, like he's the only kid on the playground, or no one will play with him, and so he's got to deal with these boring characters all around him in this really boring plot, which, by the way, they don't really address what the symbiote is doing on Earth, or what the two feuding symbiotes are doing here until like the third act. And when they introduce that, they force so much excuses for the plot through into the third act to basically reason that, okay, Venom's a good guy now. There wasn't much building up to this, other than the fact that it's like, oh well, I like you, Eddie. And I don't, and because I like you, I'll stop this other symbiote from going into space or something like that. It's just, and like I said, there, and of course there's Riot, the other symbiote there, and he, like I said, Riz Ahmed, he just kind of becomes like the standard villain, with a god complex, like nothing more, nothing interesting past that. God, this is such like a frustrating movie. Like initially, like halfway through the film, I was hating it. I was hating it. I was like, this is so boring. I don't feel any of the romance here. I don't feel any, of the horror here, or the creature feature aspect, or the comic booky superhero aspect. I'm just not feeling it. And then Tom Hardy kind of comes in to not quite save the day, but like fire up all the rockets and kamikaze into this story, and just realize, okay, look, this isn't going to be a great film, but I'm going to have fun with it. Damn it, I'm going to make something of this role, and he does. He tries to. I think Tom Hardy does about as good a job as anyone could have done in this type of role, and he really deserves a lot of credit for making it not boring. So for that, I give the film credit, and I'm going to rate it at 2 out of 5 stars. I was just about ready to go lower on it, but then I kept thinking about Tom Hardy. I kept thinking about some of the action scenes and how I did kind of smirk and laugh a few times, even though some of those laughs were unintentional on the movie's part. So there you go. I will mention this though. The mid-credit scene, not the the post-credit scene, not the mid-credit scene, is actually a little bit of a treat. It has barely any relation to Venom at all. But I'm thankful for that. Like, the post-credit scene is worth staying for. The mid-credit scene, not so much. It's going to put a bad taste in your mouth. But stay for the end of the credits. It will be worth it, especially if you didn't like the film. You'll get there's a little treat at the end there, saying like, okay, you sat through this film. Here's a here's a little something to wash the taste out of your mouth, you know.